Okay. I will do my best to speak loudly, do my very best. So welcome to the June Policy and Personnel Committee meeting. Thank you to the community for abiding by the postponement. I was not well, and I requested it because I felt very strongly about closing out the year with these very important policies. So I will just go on to Dr. Shields to start the agenda, please.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. So the information that you have before you includes last month's minutes if you need them as a reference tool. Let me give you a little update on what's going on in personnel right now. We are in the final process of hiring for the Assistant Director of PPS. That is Emily Howard-Reese, who is leaving the district. So we have finalists being screened next week, and we're going to have a recommendation to the school board at the next school board meeting. This time of year, we're also busy hiring for teacher vacancies that are due to retirements or resignations, and those are moving along. And you'll see those continue to flow onto the board agenda.
Are we having any difficulty finding applicants?
So I'll say the area where it is most challenging is right now is world languages. There's not a lot of applicants. So we had a few retirements this year in the area of Italian and French. So we have one left that we're hopeful about. I have a recommendation. Hopefully we can close the deal.
Great, thank you.
So the board had asked me to check in with our attorney about the code of conduct and what meets the expectation of the regulation that the code of conduct is reviewed. Mr. Miller said that there do not have to be any changes to the code of conduct, just that we've discussed it here at this committee level, and it's something that is reviewed annually by us. And that could just be an update to where things are now and what is going to be happening in the future. So I think we're aware that the code of conduct is going to be getting a thorough review this coming year. That recommendation has been made, and it's part of the plan that was outlined through the work with NYU this past year.
Now I know that we're talking about having a committee formed under the kind of umbrella of the NYU Metro work. And I think you mentioned last time that Dr. Pernick was going to be staffing that committee. Is that still the case? And where are we in terms of that?
So he is in the process of making all the recommendations on the members of those committees. So yes, he is in the process of doing that, and he's leading that right now.
Okay, any other update with respect to that, or that's it?
That's where we are right now.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Any questions? No? Okay. Okay, next on the agenda now, purchasing is here, but I don't see Ms. O'Hara. So is she coming, or would you like to skip this?
Yeah, we're gonna have to put the purchasing off till September.
Oh, okay.
She's home ill today.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, no. Well, if you're listening, I hope you feel better quickly. Okay. Okay, so then,
So next on the agenda, I believe we have is 1,800 gifts from the public.
oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back to 1.4. Just for the record, we have to review purchasing every year by law.
Yes.
So we did review that with Ms. O'Hara. I know she wanted to make some changes, but I guess that will come maybe in the next academic year. Can we be sure that this policy is marked reviewed? Because I'm not sure that it was on the website.
Okay. We can make sure that
I think it
the
was in
current
flux.
version is marked review.
Yes, thank you.
Without any edits to it.
Yes.
So 1,800 was a policy that we had discussed and spent some time on prior. And there were some questions that I was asked to bring back to both Howard and to Kathy. So what you have before you is an edited version, and I thank Javi for making these edits. You'll see in the end of paragraph 2, I was asked to ask that question of Howard, do we need this kind of language in our policy? And he said, and we were discussing how all gifts and donations are approved by the school board and not just accepted by the superintendent. So we don't need that sentence. Similarly, at the bottom of that page, there's a sentence that says the same thing. So we had strike through that sentence as well.
I was wondering about that, so I had questions.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this?
And then on the second page, in the middle, there's a paragraph that starts by saying the board shall receive a report annually. I spoke to Ms. O'Hara about this, and there's not an annual report that's given, but there are all donations run through the school board via the board agendas that you conduct either monthly or every 2 weeks. So that sentence really isn't necessary.
So this whole thing should come out.
Correct. That one sentence there.
So in other words, when the donations are posted on our monthly or bi-monthly agendas, that serves as the report.
Correct.
And there's nothing that needs, so that's a practice. So there's nothing that needs to go into the policy in terms of that.
Yep.
You have a question?
So I think part of what I liked about that approach was for me, when we're talking about the equity issues around this policy, so maybe we'll come up with another avenue,
Mm-hmm.
but what I was happy about in terms of that language was that we as a board we were potentially going to sit and analyze donations across the district to hopefully see that there's really actually more equity than we expected.
Right.
That's my optimism.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, Deb, or to the district as a whole, how maybe we should approach that.
So maybe then, instead of receiving a report annually, we can say the board shall annually review all gifts, donations, grants, and where each was used. And that would put the obligation on the board to sit down annually to review, rather than passively receiving a report. So then the board shall annually review all gifts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what should I review? All gifts received by the district during the school year, as well as where each was used, or
And it seems like we can request a report from the administrative office if we think it would be useful. It's really from their perspective, it's just, downloading all the agendas for the last 12 months and then copying and pasting it.
Right.
A couple of pages, it's like a 20-minute exercise.
Right.
And that actually dovetails with the comment that Ms. Milwani made at the last regular board meeting, where she strongly urged, on behalf of Parents Council and the HSAs, that we review the monies we were getting and where they were going before we started to assign that money to different places, to see where we might have deficits or need or any other word. Okay. Any other questions or any other comments you have, Dr. Shea?
The only other item you'd asked me to check on was under the cross-reference section, 6800, accounting of fixed assets. You'd asked me to ask Howard if we could use that number instead of NISBA's number, which was the 6640. And Howard thought that our 6800 was applicable,
Okay.
that we should keep that in there.
Okay, because one was inventories and the other was the accounting. Inventories, which Port Washington currently does not have as a policy, but we do have accounting and fixed assets. Okay. All right, does anybody on the committee have any comments? Because I noticed there were some things that were missing, and I think it was the way that I was addressing the policy, that rather than going paragraph by paragraph on the municipal policy and saying, this stays, this goes, I jumped over the things that stay, assuming that they would stay. So before I go into that, does anybody have any other comments about the blended version that we see now? Okay. Okay, so in the first paragraph, there's just a minor typo. The word in the first sentence, towards, should be toward, should be a lens toward equity. Okay. And going back to the template from NISPA, the template has bold headings. And so I would like to see the bold headings I would like to see them kept. So for example, the first heading is unsolicited gifts and donations from the public. Then the next bold heading is soliciting, accepting gifts, etc. So I would like to see those put in, where they need to flow on the template. Javi, I'm happy to work with you offline to get those in. So for example, it would start off with unsolicited gifts, and then we would go into our first paragraph. All right, and so after the second paragraph, where it says the Board of Education welcomes and appreciates gifts, there was another paragraph that was going to go in there before we get to the numbers 1, 2, 3, etc. And that paragraph begins, the board reserves the right to refuse to accept any gift. This is from the template. And it's a 2-line paragraph. And then the second sentence says, in accepting or rejecting gifts and donations, the board will review the following factors. And then we get into 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay. Javi, stop me if I'm going too fast. You're good. Okay. So under number 1, where it says the terms of the gift must identify. The third bullet, it should be if any. Actually, there should be semicolons after each little bullet. And then the third bullet should read, if any, semicolon, and. Add the word and then after the third, the final bullet, there should be a period. Okay. In the third bullet, in number 3, excuse me, I'm still foggy, so. The line should read exactly what's in the template. If the purpose of the gift is an award to a single student, comma, the determination of and it should be recipient of such award shall be made on the basis that all students shall have an equal opportunity to qualify for it in conformance with federal and state law. So that's how that sentence should read. That's just picking up directly from the template. Okay, and then we're good with number 4, if the gift is in trust. Oh, except for the fact that principal should be a small p. After the word income, so it should be the principal shall be clearly specified. And the application of the income or investment proceeds, we're missing or investment. And I'm just picking this up directly from the template. And then there should be, on the template, it goes on to say, no gift or trust will be accepted by the board unless, and that would be item number 5. So it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that would be number 5. Okay. And then we have our bold heading, soliciting and accepting gifts. And then we get into the paragraph that says, prior to seeking any grant or donation, the applicant must obtain, that's good, that's good. Okay. And then we're missing the paragraph that says, approval shall depend on factors including but not limited to. To that paragraph, so I realized I had skipped over those paragraphs, just assuming that they would be included, so I apologize for not communicating that better. And then after we have all the bulleted items, there's the paragraph from the template that says the board reserves the right to deny approval of solicitation. And then after that, all solicited grants must be formally accepted by the board. That goes in there after the whole list of bulleted stuff and before the paragraph that says the district requires independent support organizations. Okay, and then after the paragraph that says the district requires independent support organizations, we have the accounting heading, the bold accounting heading. And under that it says, all gifts, donations, grants, fund property become the property of the district. That's from the template. And then we have, let me just and then we have our newly worded paragraph about the board annually reviewing. And then I think we need to bring this back and see how it looks again to see if there was anything repetitive. And we'll see how it looks with the, oh, I'm sorry, and there was another heading, coordinating with support organizations. But Javi, if you just follow that along, I'm just following the template. And I think that fixes it. So that fixes, I think, the substance in terms of meshing this with the NISBA template. And then we have the bigger issue of the eye toward equity. And I think that the sentence, to Nan's comment about annually reviewing, I think that would help us with the lens toward equity. And then we could, because I want to take Parents Council and the HSA comments to heart, but I think that one sentence, you're shaking your head yes? That one sentence, I think, will allow us to do that at the end of each year. Any thoughts about that?
I think that helps.
That helps, okay. Any other comments from the committee? We were good? Okay, thumbs up, good, okay. Next.
All right, homework. The committee may recall that we had a first reading at the last board meeting, and what we did is we then brought those edits that were recommended by a member of the board back to some teacher and administrator leaders, and they had some more edits, which I have shared with you today. And the goal I know is to get back on for an adoption, so we can go into the new school year with it completely done, because there's been a lot of work in leading up to today. So the edits that you see are in bold on your version there.
And their thinking was?
Their thinking was that there's the find this balance between we want to have some consistency, which they heard loud and clearly, but we also need to give the individual teacher some flexibility, because not every class is the same on each grade level, not every child needs the same thing in each class. So they heard the sentence that's at the bottom of the page of the last paragraph, that the district aims to have consistency in homework. They understand that, but that they also wanted to make sure that there's some discretion provided by the teacher in achieving that goal of consistency, which is where these two sentences came. Homework requirements and frequency are at the discretion of each individual teacher. Teachers will make an effort to balance daily and long-term assignments, including time necessary for test preparation. Then there was a sentence that was written in the negative originally, so they just flipped it and made it into the positive. Teachers across all curriculum are encouraged to create homework assignments that reflect state standards and cultivate meaningful skills.
So there was a sentence that they completely omitted. They took out, teachers are cautioned to avoid overloading students with excessively lengthy homework assignments or with overly brief and empty assignments.
Yes, that was the negative sentence that they said, this is borderline, insulting. So why don't we find a way to say the same thing in a positive way, which is where they came up with teachers across all curriculum are encouraged to create homework assignments that reflect state standards and cultivate meaningful skills.
Okay. I think, just for the record, I think that negative sentence came from the NISPA template. I'm not sure. Yes, it did. It's actually verbatim from the NISPA template. So just for the listening audience and the teachers out there, understand that. Okay, I appreciate the fact that it's perceived as negative. Any comment? Just see. Any comments from the committee?
So the strike through that you see at the bottom, that was just a repetitive sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So we felt like, why say it twice? Let's just make sure it's clear above.
Mm-hmm. Any comments from the committee?
I like that they managed to massage the message that we were concerned about in terms of consistency, but also another member of the board was concerned that it sounded as if now every classroom every day has to have the same amount, and that was a concern as well of being too rigid, while at the same time addressing the concern of consistency. So finding that balance, I'm glad that I feel like this is a closer approach to that. So thank you for taking the time to do that for us.
Dr. Black?
So there's three new sentences. The teachers will make an effort to balance daily and long-term assignments. I like that new sentence. Teachers across all curriculum are encouraged to create homework assignments. I like the change of that sentence. I think that's great. the first sentence though, homework requirements and frequency are at the discretion of each individual teacher, seems to directly contradict the amount of homework should be based upon the following suggested guidelines per grade level or course type. So I don't support that sentence in its current form. I understand what the objective is, which is to make sure that there's some flexibility built in, and I support that. But I think that sentence, particularly the placement of it, basically directly contradicts what a large portion of the objective of the policy change is.
Where's that last sentence you were reading?
Homework requirements. and
It's in
frequency.
the fourth
Oh,
paragraph.
okay, sorry.
Yeah. So, right, so if you read this sentence independently, without anything else, homework requirements and frequency are at the discretion of each individual teacher. To me, it's like, well, what, like, why are we reading the rest of the policy? So, I think we need to do something, to lighten that tone, to, give them discretion over timing. And I think first, that second sentence does that in part, right? But the first sentence is too strong, so I think we need to think about some alternative language or some alternatives.
Can we move that sentence to, would it help you? Because I understand your point, 100%. Would it help to move that sentence right before the sentence where we lead into the amount of homework should be based upon the following suggested guidelines? Can we say, although homework requirements and frequency are generally at the discretion of each individual teacher, comma, the amount of homework should be based upon the following suggested guidelines?
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm totally good with that.
Dr. Shields, how do you think that needs to go back to teacher leadership?
I don't
Or
believe so.
we can put that on
Yeah.
for our second read, our adoption.
Yeah,
Okay, so,
because I think the message that they're trying to convey, as well as you're trying to convey, are merged nicely.
and so we,
Perfect.
that's a perfect spot, okay. So we're going to move that sentence, I just want to be sure, when it's on for adoption, that there's no, I'll look at it in board docs beforehand, but, so although homework requirements and frequency are generally at the discretion of each individual teacher, comma, the amount of homework should be based upon the following, so forth and so on. Also, the first paragraph, I see her homework is indented, and everything either should be flush or everything should be indented, so I like it personally. However, it looks pretty to you, hobby is fine. You just want to unindent the first
Well,
paragraph.
unindent.
Yeah, that's word.
Okay, awesome. Okay, without further ado,
All right, thank you
Thank
to
you.
everyone that's
Thank
working
you.
on this.
Yes.
We are moving.
to the teacher leadership, to everybody involved in this very collaborative piece, I hope that it works, and of course it has teeth only if administration and the superintendent follow through with the regulations and making sure that this is operational the way the board intended it, and of course, if the parents also let us know, as hopefully they have all along, if they see issues in the classroom. Obviously, individual issues should be addressed with the teacher, but if there are systemic issues, hopefully that goes up the chain of command to the appropriate people to make sure this policy is being followed as intended, because as with any policy, none of these policies have teeth unless the appropriate personnel and ultimately the board are made aware.
So in that vein, Deb, do you want to think about putting it on the agenda for September or October meeting? Like assuming that it passes the board in July, do you want to think about putting it on the board? Like, is this the appropriate place to put it on the agenda for regulations on homework policy for maybe not September, but October, like, so that we keep it fresh in our minds?
To make sure that regulations are being promulgated, passed, written. Sure. Sure, in this committee to follow up.
Right, I think
Sure,
it's
same
this-
with grading,
I think it's this
actually.
committee, right?
Yes.
And, yeah.
Same with grading.
And so we keep the
Yes.
momentum.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be September, but but October, the fall, it seems like a reasonable time.
Sure, bring it back to the committee for homework and grading. Oh boy, moving right along. Dr. Shields?
Okay. So, 1810 is gifts to school personnel. We've had a first reading at the board meeting on June 7th. Any edits that were requested in prior meetings have been made. The question is now, is that based on the comments that we got from parent council at the last board meeting during the public session, during their public comments, do we feel we need to edit this policy further? Because I think the homework that was given to us was we need to hear from parent council. And I remember we'd also asked, is the $75 limit something that is still in law? And yes, it is. That was confirmed by our school attorney. So now, do we feel we need to edit it further, or are we okay leaving it as is?
I have one, I guess just a basis question to start with for me is this one of the required ones? Are we required to have this policy at all?
We are not, oh, I'm sorry, it's a local notice. It's on the template, it actually, this says it's local and notice are both checked off.
So to Ms. Malwani's point, part of what she mentioned at the meeting was enforcement, right? And how complicated this is just in terms of practice, right?
Right.
So I'm wondering if we even continue to have this.
Yeah, so I think I wouldn't know about the $75 limit, like we give our teachers gifts every year, and I wouldn't know about the $75 limit unless it was in there or I had heard word of mouth. So I think there's some value to just having that, because I think there are people that want to give a gift, don't want to, and don't know what to do, and don't want to be outside the law. If they know what the law is, they'll be within it. So I think there's some value to just having that number in some way in a policy. Even though I think the number should be higher.
So the number's set by statute.
I know, I know.
But, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Miller. When I read it again, you can read it 10 times, and each time it's like you pass a house 10 times and you notice something different each time. When I was reading this and when I read the statute, to me it seems that this gift is tethered specifically to circumstances in which it could reasonably be inferred that the gift was intended to influence the performance of their duties. So right there we know that's not what's happening in class gifts. Or reward official action. So it's almost as though this is saying the purpose is to make sure that there's no bribe or intent to influence action here, which I think we all know and at the very least hope that that's not what the class gift involves.
Right.
The class gift is about spirit, generosity, goodwill. Also thanks, but more in the spirit of a holiday season or an end of year gift. So I'm wondering if this paragraph is necessary, I think, for an ethical reason, but I don't know that the spirit with which the gifts are given falls within this concern. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, but we have to somehow have them merged together.
Yes.
This is because we can't police what the intent is of a gift.
Yes. So I'm wondering, if maybe where it says the Board of Education welcomes the writing of letters, I'm wondering if class gifts to show simple appreciation, while not encouraged, are also welcome. I don't want to muddy the waters, because we started out by saying that we don't want to make this seem as though this is something that has to happen in a classroom, putting aside the $75, putting aside those concerns, that this is not encouraged or expected. This is neither encouraged nor expected. And when Ms. Mawani spoke, there were 5 takeaways I got, and one of them was, do teachers actually expect teacher gifts? And also, even if the gift is nominal, do parents still feel compelled to participate? So, balancing all of that with now this thought that the $75, I want to keep the balance, and I'm asking the committee if there is language that you think we should put in to keep the balance, while also making sure that class gifts are not expected to be given. Because the last thing Ms. Mawani said was she believes the policy is necessary. She said it doesn't have any teeth, but she believes the policy is necessary. Excuse me. So does the language, do we need to add anything to the language?
Yeah, I mean, that's my question, is I'm happy we're reviewing it, but it's not clear to me what we are looking for that it's not already doing. In other words, I don't see any objectives that we have that the current policy is not already meeting.
Okay. Ms. Melconian?
I feel like it touches on the things that we've discussed and that we've heard from Parents Council.
Okay. So do we put this on for adoption then, as is? Because it was on for a first read.
This is a new,
This is an existing policy. We beefed it up with the NISBA template.
okay. So it's an edited, okay.
Yeah, so we would mark it revised with a date.
Well, so then, but at the last board meeting, we said we review it in committee. Do we know exactly what the concern from Parents Council was that, right, like, we brought it back, and here we are not changing it. My concern is that we bring it up to the school, to the board, and then we haven't changed anything, and they have the same concern. So I guess I'm not 100% clear on what the request was for us to do from Parents Council, what it was not meeting.
When I listened to Parents Council regarding this policy, Parents Council addressed both policies.
Both gifts. Right?
The other policy was the need to review the needs of the building and the district needs in general. The HSAs excuse me, exist to serve the individual communities, and the concern was if we start taking money away from them, that kind of negates the purpose of serving their communities. I'm talking about the other policy.
Right.
I did define the scope of the HSA's efforts. That was that policy. But then for policy 1810, my big takeaways were the HSAs typically are guided by equity and inclusivity already as a practice. They do make it clear there's no obligation or pressure on parents. Even so, some parents still feel obligated, even though whenever a card goes out or a gift goes out, it's all the parents are included automatically. The feeling was this policy didn't have any teeth. How were we supposed to stop class parents from doing what they do? Question was, do the teachers anyway expect gifts anyway? And then finally, but the policy is necessary. So those were the notes I took in listening.
Okay.
So I think that as with everything, the goal is to have a policy that sets up a philosophy, excuse me, and then to hopefully have the HSAs guide that. toward the class parents, toward the lens of equity and inclusivity without pressure. And I think that's the best we can do, is this is just providing local notice. And as I said, I think with any policy, how does anything get policed? How does anything have teeth?
Right.
Whether it's the grading policy or the homework policy or.
Certainly, I don't think we need to add any sort of policing of this. I don't think that's a good idea, so I'm good with the policy as it is.
What we may want to say is the presentation of gifts to district employees by students and or their parents, actually parents or guardians, I'll put guardians in there. Can we add the word guardians, please? Shall not be an encouraged practice. Can we add gifts should be guided by equity and inclusivity? Can we add that? And that helps the HSAs and the class parents, and it's our overarching theme. Can we add that anyway? Yes? No? Committee? I'm asking.
Oh,
Yes,
yes.
Okay, yes?
yes.
Okay. Gifts, if given, shall be guided by principles of equity and inclusivity. Okay. Okay. And again, the teeth part, as with everything, comes with knowing the policy exists and abiding by the spirit of the policy. And I guess if it comes to the board or the superintendent where we hear that things have gone amok or the policy is being abused or one teacher is getting a trip to Aruba, I'm obviously being facetious, but which doesn't happen in our district, but you understand my point, then or
It
if
would
a
be
par-
it would need to be addressed.
it would need to be addressed,
Yeah.
clearly. Okay. Any other comments from the committee on that? So we'll put that back on for adoption with that comment added.
All right, so next item on the agenda is policy 2370. This committee has done some work on this policy before during the school year. And what you have now is a blended version of the current policy and the NISBA policy. And it is for your review again.
So this blended version was put up online last night, I think.
This morning,
This morning.
yes. I
So-
saw your email and I met with Javi this morning to make sure it was present.
Thank you. I apologize for getting back to you late, but as when we pass a house and sometimes we don't see it, it occurred to me that it wasn't there. So I'm going to ask the committee, since you're just now seeing this, and there's a lot to take in, where do you feel comfortable? Do you feel comfortable reviewing it now, or would you like to postpone it to the next meeting when you've had a chance to look at the blended version against any changes we discussed at the
So
last
in terms
meeting?
of the paper, this is the old one,
The short version.
this is the 1230 is the new one, and this is the 1230 with the strike throughs is the NISBA template.
1230 with the highlights. I'll tell you, the NISBA template reads as a title, public participation with the word struck out, comment at board meetings.
And this is public attendance, this is
Ours
this
is
what our
public,
proposal
yes.
is.
Yes, and the NISBA has all the highlighting and the shaded stuff. So there's a lot going on, and I don't wanna put the committee members under pressure to sit here and go through and, if you wanna bring it back, we can have a meeting in July, we can come back in September. Doesn't, it's however everybody's comfortable. Because the other thing was, now that the open meetings law has been revised yet again about, I guess it's called the hybrid meeting. I don't know if there's anything, NISBA hasn't come out with anything yet, this is all brand new. I don't know if there's anything that our attorneys think should be added to the public attendance, / comment new policy regarding this hybrid thing
Right.
that's come along. So it may be good to put this off until a later time, so we can ask council. Because I know a resolution, the board has to pass a resolution in order to be able to have such an animal in the future. And I don't know how it affects public participation, if at all, and if it does, how that language should go into this policy.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So, right, because I feel comfortable discussing this today, but I think we are now in a world of more hybrid meetings, and it doesn't feel like we have addressed it, and nor do I think that we can address it without getting advice from council.
Council.
Yeah, because we want to be able to permit on that.
Right, we want to be flexible, but we don't want to be outside of the law, and so, yeah.
Everybody
I
agree?
understand why we have to delay, which I think
Okay,
is safe.
so the committee is unanimous on that. So let's ask council, if council has any type of understanding or handle on this new issue. And I just wanted to say for the record, there were 2 different June dates being floated at the last board meeting about open meetings laws. One of them was this brand new statutory creation that's come about that went into effect as of June 8th. But concurrent with that is the governor's executive order that has allowed committees such as this to meet virtually. That order was not set, that particular executive order was not set to expire until, the emergency order, until June 14th. It has subsequently been extended by the governor. If you are interested, you can go to the Committee on Open Government website, and there they say that committees such as this can continue to meet virtually, if you so choose, until July 16th. I don't know if the governor is going to extend that again, but I had a lovely conversation with the woman in charge of the Committee on Open Government, who confirmed that yes, this meeting could have been held virtually, just for people listening, those here. I don't know what it will be going forward, but for the committees going forward, to constantly check the website for the Committee on Open Government if you choose to proceed virtually in the future. So just, since we're here and it was discussed at the last board meeting, I just wanted to update everybody about that. Because the information given at the last board meeting was no, we could not have this virtually. But the Committee on Open Government has confirmed that yes, this could be virtually and going forward until July 14th at least. So if you decide that we want to bring back this participation policy virtually and not make everybody come here over the summer, we can do that. I leave it up to you. Okay, so we will, for now, we will put public attendance on for a future meeting. I guess if the committee decides that we want to bring it back over the summer, there's nothing to stop us from meeting over the summer. We can, you know, usually, but we can. And we'll go from there. Right now, there's no summer meeting, just so everybody understands, no summer meeting scheduled. And we'll wait and see what Mr. Miller says. Maybe by
I'll
then.
bring it back to Mr. Miller for his input.
Yes, and the Committee on Open Government actually has a template for resolutions on their website. I don't know if it would be applicable to school boards necessarily, because we're not the same as town governments and, other bodies that are governed by this, but anyway, it's there. Oh, we're actually gonna get through the agenda. So excited.
No.
The next item on the agenda, you had asked Ms. Brooks to bring to the committee. We have a policy that was created in April of 2021 on gender-neutral single occupancy bathrooms, known as 5633. I think you had some questions about,
Yes.
is it current enough?
Yes, correct. So in October of 21, and this has been on the agenda several times. We've never gotten to it. Our policy is basically okay, except for the fact that in October, the Commissioner of Education refined the language for where the sign designating the gender neutral single occupancy bathrooms must be posted. They must be posted on the wall next to the door of the bathroom facility, as opposed to, where do we have it?
Last sentence.
Yes, as to near, either on or near the entry door. So that language is no longer good. So our entire third paragraph gets replaced. So what I would suggest is that we have currently 3 paragraphs. I would suggest keeping paragraph number 1. I would replace paragraph number 2 with paragraph number 2 in the NISPA template, because the NISPA template specifically says how single occupancy bathroom is defined, and it gives the statute for that definition, which I think is helpful. And then our last sentence, where it says it will be clearly designated, we can use the first 2 sentences from the NISPA template, where it says all single occupancy bathroom facilities in the district are designated as gender neutral, signs designating, and then so forth and so on, that sentence. And then the final paragraph, and then the final paragraph from the NISPA template should be added as well. So basically, we're keeping just our first paragraph, and then we're following through with the rest of the NISPA template. Because the first paragraph outlines the district's commitment as a philosophy to maintaining the inclusive environment.
Sounds good.
Okay. And then under reference, the education law specifically is 409M, which we have. The public buildings law is 145, and then we just want to add subsection D. And then they've also added the building code of New York State. Be sure to add that. And this is a required policy. So we're now in conformance with the required policy and the statutes.
So we're gonna bring this on for first read?
Yes, we'll put this on for first read. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. Any comments from the community? And our community consists of a board member, Rachel Gillier, and Mr. Border, did you want to?
But if someone wants to go,
Ms. Klein, did you have a?
I'm good, thank you.
Our incoming Junior Parents Council co-president, Ms. Klein. Welcome. Yes, Ms. Diller.
So on the homework policy, first of all, congratulations, because this was a very, very long time coming. I have a comment and a question, and I think some of the back and forth on homework is that board dynamic has changed a little, although I guess the board members we've lost didn't really care about homework at all, with no offense intended. But I think part of the back and forth is we have two different philosophies pulling, and maybe Dr. Block and I are the ends of it. And when I started working on this policy, my concern was homework that is too much, right? Too much of a burden on students, inappropriate levels of homework. And I think Dr. Block's concern is making sure that homework is given. These are obviously two ends, and I think it's important to publicly note that this is kind of a policy that's hopefully for the outliers already, right? I mean, as all policy is, it's to bring everybody into what we want the norm to be, but hopefully the majority of our teachers are already looking at their students, looking at their classes, judging the amount of homework that is appropriate for that class. But we obviously have moments that Dr. Block is concerned about where no homework is being given and he thinks it should be given, and it should be in line with other schools or other classes in a grade. And we have my end of things where I am concerned that sometimes the inconsistency we see is homework being a burden on students without added value. And I think that's the piece of it that's really important to note, because I don't think anybody is opposed to homework in principle. It's that it has to be a well thought out part of the education and the curriculum. It has to serve a purpose, because we worry a lot about stressing out our students. And if we are adding homework that doesn't add other educational value, then I think we're burdening them unnecessarily. So all that said, and coming from where my concern is versus where Dr. Block's concern is, although I respect Dr. Block's concern, and by the way, I want to note that we're coming from two different elementary school experiences, and I have students at Weber, and just the fact that he and I see this homework issue so differently is potentially an indicator of inconsistency and the differences in experience from school to school and class to class, because even though we all sit here as board members, our experiences and the experiences of the people we talk to informs our concerns, and that's why I always think it's so helpful when people come and talk to us who we know or we don't know, because it broadens what we can see that's happening in the district. So let's, from a hypothetical, right? So I'm always thinking about these policies and thinking about how is this applied, what does it look like down the line? So I have seen a lot that teachers say, okay, May 31st or end of the first week in June, no more homework now. It's summer, it's beautiful out. This is at the elementary level, obviously, because in the middle school and the high school, they're worried about finals, they're worried about APs, the schedule is different. But at the elementary level, they say, go out and play, right? Go play, enjoy your time outside, the sun is up for longer, no more homework for these last 3 weeks or 2 weeks of school. How does this policy impact that? And obviously, I say that with the knowledge that the administration always has discretion, right? And is not going to blindly enforce something. But the policy that we write is what's there for parents to look at. And so if a parent were to go to their principal and say, here's the board policy says your teachers are supposed to be giving homework. And my teacher said my kid should go out and play. And what's that about? I'm aiming for Rhodes Scholarship here and homework all the way, all day, every day homework. None of this writing off June. How will the administration respond to that? And does this policy put you in a bad position, put the principals and Dr. Hines in a bad position of needing to say, well, what we believe is inconsistent with this board policy And is there anything that we need to add or change to not make it feel that the administration is not enforcing a board policy? So I liked the teachers' additions of the flexibility of language. There's always a pull and a push here, right?
Of course.
We want educational flexibility, we want teacher freedom. The way I always see it is policy, we have the ability to say, here are the different things you get to have in your arsenal. There are things we don't believe in, you don't get to have them in your toolbox, right? The most egregious is corporal punishment. We don't allow it. It doesn't matter what a teacher thinks is appropriate, we do not allow it. Obviously, this is not this level, but I think it's the most clear example. So I guess, not to put you on the spot, Dr. Shields,
Okay.
but like, that's sort of my question is, are we hamstringing the administration in a way that we don't want to? I think a lot of work has gone into putting some really elegant language in here, and that's my last remaining concern, is making parents feel that their teacher is supposed to be fully following this to the letter. And that was my concern at the last public meeting, is do these numbers make it look like there is a minimum and a maximum when we mean the word suggested as, it's in this ballpark. This is like kind of where it's appropriate, but you could be a little over, you could be a little under, as long as it's appropriate for your class and your curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the work that this committee has done with input from the other trustee members is that they've looked to design a policy that is much clearer on what the expectations are, while also giving that flexibility. So, for example, we didn't have grade level expectations for the number of minutes, and now we do. But we also call them guidelines. So we do give that wiggle room, but we're also being clear that this is philosophically what we're expecting overall from our teachers and our principals that are administering this policy. So I would like to think that now we're going to go and live this policy, right? And we're going to see how it impacts the day-to-day operations. If there's something that is problematic in it that we thought was really good here at this level, and even with the other people that have looked at this policy, there's something problematic with it, we would bring it back to this committee and say, hey, we've learned from living this policy for a year or two that we need to modify it. We would do so. But my hope is that we have really engaged all different constituent groups on input on this policy. And as you remember, there was a professional growth and curriculum development committee that looked at this issue as well the previous school year and gave us input on what they thought about our past policy, and now gave input on the new policy that we're recommending. So I would like to think that we have vetted this thoroughly, and now we're going to go live it and see what it's like. I think it's a really good step, and now we have to deliver on it to see how it impacts our schooling.
I just wanted to add in the second paragraph, it says teachers should assign meaningful homework. And I guess that can be taken in a lot of ways. But if at the end of the school year, a teacher has covered the curriculum, let's say, is it necessary to give homework? Because I'm just going back to when my own experience and when my daughter was in elementary school, and there were some cases where after the state tests, you saw this huge slide in slide downwards as to what was being taught in the classroom and the amount of homework coming home. Because that big push for ELA and math was over, and then it really was almost a coast toward June. I don't know if that's changed, hopefully it has, but I think if a teacher feels in June that they've covered enough curriculum, I think they'll know. I trust that our teachers will know what to do in that circumstance. If this is the case in November or December, right, if it's a perpetual thing where there's no homework, that's where our concern comes in. And I would hope that they've gotten toward, they're finishing the curriculum. At least that's not always the case. I know with the AP courses, they finish it to get to the AP exam, and sometimes there's stuff that just isn't covered. That's a completely different issue in my book. So I agree. We live with it. I think we won't know until we live with it.
The only other piece, if I can add something else, I think this line that the teachers added about making effort to balance daily and long-term assignments is a fantastic addition, because when we codify things, we run the risk of making things more rigid. And I think that this district and education in general is trying to move away from the model that education was created on, where we were creating factory workers and we were making things very lockstep and very rote. And we're trying to do more project-based learning here, and more portfolios and more long-term projects. We see teachers doing things that are presentation style productions in the elementary school more. It doesn't look like traditional homework, but a child is practicing their lines at night for, this is a real example from one of my classes, a play that they have written about the American Revolution. And I do trust teachers on this, but I want to make sure that we don't foster a push back towards you're supposed to be giving out X number of dittos because they should fill this amount of time, because that's not where we're supposed to be moving in education or where we're trying to move. So I would love it if we would calendar this for the end of next school year and maybe get some feedback specifically on it, if it's had any impact at all, if we're worried about any potentially bad impact, if we're worried any language needs to be changed.
Okay.
So we're calendaring it for the beginning of the school year for the regulations, and I guess for the end of the school year for kind of a post-mortem review, I think. Hopefully not exactly post-mortem.
Well, and I think sometimes there are policies that have ended up being applied in a way that's different than they're written. Those have come back in years past to the policy committee, and then we see an inconsistency. This actually, to be clear, happened with our previous superintendent, but I can think of one specific instance where we ended up discussing policy and the administration was enforcing it in one way, and that's really not what the policy said. And we rewrote the policy to make it match what we thought should be happening on the ground. And I think this is one of those that we should make sure is happening right. So obviously, I'm sure the administration along the way is going to make the right decisions, and you should come back and say to us, look, like, this is the stuff that came to us, and we enforced it in a way that was right, but we need to change this language.
Yeah.
I'd like to address two of your policies. First of all, Ms. Gillier could not have said it better. I'm glad she spoke first, because she is so eloquent. I do also agree with Mr. Block in the sense that we all know, it's not a secret, how many students are working until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't care what class you're in, AP, whatever, that's not acceptable. There is something wrong there. At the same time, there are classes where whatever work is being given is totally meaningless. I mean, I could go on, you know me, I could go on with examples that I'm aware of, and by the way, I'm keeping a diary of all these things, because one day maybe I'll write a book about all this. There is, consistency is not uniformity. We're not asking here to create the France d'école system, where in every school in France, they know exactly what they're teaching. There is some discretion because we live in a district with certain norms and culture. But the question, and you brought up a very important issue, Ms. Brooks, is who enforces this? Who makes sure, and I will tell you, as having been there, it's very difficult to supervise people who you are working with, who you can create animosities and other issues that come up when you have to, and also it's the phone to confront someone. I don't know if everyone is aware, years ago, New York State tried to, in the legislature, to pass a new system where we would supervise teachers differently, as well as administrators, because, by the way, when I say teachers, I include administrators, having been one of them. Administrators need to be supervised too. And I thought it was a great system, but it got very close to passing, and eventually it was, the forces that be totally eliminated. Because I will tell you, I do believe in the responsibility. Most of our teachers, I think, are responsible. But who enforces? Who makes sure, at least, even an orchestra has a conductor. If you are the flute player, I'm not going to tell you. You have your way of playing your flute within the concert. You have your humanity and but I, as a conductor, will try to bring you in with the rest. And that's what principals are. That's what administrators are. It's not an adversarial role. Oh, Ms. Brooks, what are you doing? No, it's not that. When I was a social studies teacher in high school, we didn't have any rules. We just had, as a department, we went along. You're teaching this, we're teaching this. We try to sort of keep the department together so that we move the kids more or less uniformly. And if we had a problem, we would go to supervisors and say, I'm falling behind, what can I do? Anyway, so you're right. How do we supervise that? How do we make sure that the administrators, who I will tell you honestly, having been an administrator, it's different in certain areas, but you're not going to go and walk over the line because it creates a lot of problems. It invokes a blowback to you. And if the board is not supporting the administrators or the superintendent, everyone is saying, I'm not going to touch that. So it's the culture. I think teachers, if the culture of the district is such that we expect certain things as a culture, not as a mandate, I think teachers, administrators, including parents, because I will be the first one to say some parents are crazy. Maybe I'm one of those, but it's true. And we all need to work collaboratively. Okay, the second thing is about public participation at board meetings. Recently there was a court finding, a federal court finding. I believe it was in California, or could be New Mexico, I don't know exactly, where it addressed the issue of speaking in public at board meetings. And I understand the Board of Education, they are very intimidated because, we have all this animosity towards boards of education and so on, and they came up to, and accusing the board president and the board president didn't like it too much. And they instituted some of the language that I'm reading here. Well, this group went to court, federal court, and the court just brought it down. Freedom of speech. You cannot intimidate the speakers at the forum unless they are disruptive or hostile or creating a hostile environment, of course. So that's a court decision. I did ask, I called the State Department. And they said, well, the fact that it's a federal court decision, it will have, and the lawyers here will, it has a basis for an appeal, or that it opens the door for in other states to argue the same issue.
So what is the issue? I'm trying to understand, was it that the board president said something, in this particular case, said something to a participant, a community participant?
Yeah, there were some of these, we have the hearing.
But it was not the behavior of this board, it was the board in that
In
case.
California, let's say California, they were arguing, you guys are a bunch of blah, 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 you know. And this group got up and said, you know, you guys are the board, you know, you can just imagine what they were saying. So the board president at the next meeting said, okay, we're gonna limit what you say, how you say it, and then you have to identify yourself and all that. I said, really? So they went to federal court, and the court struck that down. So what I'm saying is, if you look at Port Washington, we really don't have that many commentaries in public. I mean, the few times that I have seen people arguing or being hostile, except back to when Mr. Sussman was the board president. And that was among the board members, not being involved public. I don't see any animosity. So if I get up there and I say, I don't agree with Ms. Gilliard, we go, okay, you know. I mean, if I'm disrupting the board meeting and I'm going on, which I could, Mr. Borda, you have finished your 3 minutes, you'll finish. I see that. But I think we should be careful not to limit speech as long as it's not hateful, disruptive. And I will tell you, I say this as I'm concerned that there is a movement in this town. I'm pretty sure you guys are aware that it is very keen in taking over the school board eventually. Not now, maybe, but they are keen, they have a mission. They're going to really revamp all this. You know, some things they say are like, oh wow, even friends that I have, they say, well, you know, what they're saying makes sort of sense. But then in the end, is, you know, you're not gonna sell your soul to the devil. That's the problem for me. You know, I tell them, I'm not gonna sell my soul to the devil just because I might agree with some things. And one last thing is, with all due respect to the Parish Council, which, by the way, many moons ago I was a member of, they are great institutions. The HSAs, PTAs, they are great. Again, I'm still a member of a gate. But they do not represent, I should not say that, they do not represent, they do represent a segment of thinking, of participation. But there are plenty of people in this town that do not feel represented. Now, you might ask, well, Mr. Borda, how are we going to, you know, we are here. If these people don't come out to board meetings or talk to us, how the hell are we going to find out what they want? It's difficult for people to talk. I think I had a conversation with board members. It's difficult, even for me, believe it or not. You know, get up in public, everyone is looking. You know, people are going to say, well, look at the idiot talking or whatever. Maybe surveys constructed in a way that are not necessarily destructive. How do you feel about this? Maybe that's a way of reaching out. And maybe it could be many languages, Spanish, Japanese, whatever. Reach out to those communities because, and please correct, I mean, with Marconian, you know that. How many people I have heard coming to me says, why do you hang out with again? I mean, or why were you a member of the PTA? You were a member of your HSA. Do you feel that, I mean, I'm sure that, I'm sorry. Do they really, I think they mean well, don't get me wrong. I think they mean well, they want to do the right thing. But most people are intimidated for various reasons. Some of them are ridiculous, but some of them are, you know, who wants to come here and speak to you guys? You know, and maybe be members of the community, be here and be subjected to them.
Well, I'd like to think we're a friendly bunch here.
You know, I will say this for the Board of Education through my years, 16 years before Washington. The Board of Education has always been very polite. The Board of Education has always been very respectful, which in some districts, especially if you go to places like Comac, might not be the case. I shouldn't have said Comac, whatever, Suffolk County. So I will say, I told this to Ms. Sloan. I I said, Karen, we might disagree on many things, but you do know how to run a board. If only you run it not such an dictatorial way, it would be better. But anyway, I'll digress now. But I do not criticize the board in terms that they are mean, evil people. They're not. They're trying their best. And I thank them for that. It's just that, to be a board member, it is more than just attending meetings. It's really being involved, having a passion. And that doesn't mean that your soul goes every day. When I was a teacher, I had the passion to work, a principal. One of the greatest, I will finish with this. One of the greatest superintendents in New York State, Dr. Negroni, who passed away, and was one of my teachers at Columbia. He said to all of us who were in administration, do not ask for forgiveness. Do not ask for permission, always ask for forgiveness. When it comes to children, always do the right things. And don't be afraid to be criticized, and don't be afraid of your job. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comments. I just wanted to point out that this policy for public attendance really addresses disorderly conduct and speech that is truly inappropriate. Not at the discretion of the board president, but just in just general civil discourse. So it talks about obscene language, defamatory statements, threats of violence. So hopefully we won't have a need to have.
When this works, I think a law was just passed in New York State, where if you make threatening statements, you could be arrested. I think it was very recent, within the month or so.
I don't know. Thank you for your
Okay,
comments.
thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so there will be some future board meeting. Look for it in September. Committee meeting. Look for it in September, I would imagine, unless we decide to have one in July. And then I wish everybody a healthy summer and a safe summer. And this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for Dr. Shields, I just want to say thank you for I believe, a very productive year, a really most productive year, and to the committee members as well, and the community for participating, whether here or virtually. Your comments have made it into various policies, so never feel that you don't matter. And always, where I'm concerned, always speak up.
Thank you for your leadership as the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're still live.
We're still live.
Until we
so
are
we
not
should-
live. I think we can unplug it or